You're live.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another session of Forward Focus Thursday with emphasis on forward thinking. I'm back after a week's hiatus. Michael A. Cousin from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, along with my brothers and my nephew and my father, who are serving as the panelists for this. And I wish to thank, before I forget, Brother Lavender, and praise the Lord, and for Reverend Pace for blessing us, and Sister Letitia Frey for helping us as well. So now we're going to go around from the youngest to the wisest to let us know what we're talking about today. And before I begin, yes, I'm attending a webinar for the 2nd Episcopal District for my friends who may see me. Yes, I'm watching it right now. Bishop is speaking, doing a lovely job. And just want you all to know that you can multitask. And for those who are ambivalent, get an iPad stand because it helps. And so now let us go. Stephen in New Haven, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm all right, hanging in there. So it's 50 degrees outside, which is summer for us. So I'm thankful for that, but good to be here today.
All right. Joe, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Just down here in Macon at getting ready to start Founders Day tonight and tomorrow. And actually it's in Fort Valley, but we're staying in Warner Robins. The service is in Fort Valley, but to me, so I just say Macon, it's all about the same area. Just here.
All right. Steve, how you doing, man, out there in Kansas City?
I'm doing great. I'm at the church today. We're having a man come out to look at replacing our chairlift because we are trying to get back into corporate worship on the first Sunday of March. We will have been out for just about 2 full years. So we're trying to get things together. So I'm at the church today. Praise God.
Praise the Lord. All right. Phil, how you doing out there in Sacramento on the left coast?
Oh, just fine.
Wow, that was terse. You care to unpack that? I mean, fine means feelings inside never expressed. So is there something you wish to add to that?
You just did.
Okay. And for Daddy, how you doing in your recliner? Like you comfortable today?
Well, I'm in my big chair today, feeling good and comfortable. And I decided to change the background and be comfortable while I do it. But it is really interesting how monotony is taking over enthusiasm in almost all the circles in life. Most people I have talked to, many of them don't even know what day it is. The monotony of just going through the same thing over and over, and the routine over and over. And I have to stop and ask myself, what day is this? Is it a Monday? Is it a Tuesday? We used to anchor all of our weeks on Sunday, but with the virtual aspect, it's hard to anchor your weeks on a Sunday. But we're trying, doing good, can't complain.
Amen. And before we begin to it, I wish to recognize Reverend Lomax from Selma, Alabama, who's watching. I pastor the church south of Selma, Newberry, close to Snow Hill, Mount Olive. So to my good friends over there in Alabama, God bless you. So let's get to it now. Today is sort of like a free flow Thursday to talk about some of the current events that are going on, from the misinformation put out by the ultra-right about the health initiative from the Biden administration, to we see over in foreign affairs with I was in a Jersey Mike's 2 days ago, and the young men behind the counter wanted to discuss with me the ramifications of the buildup of troops on the Russian-Ukraine border. We even have here within our own country, isn't it something? I think it's in the state of Indiana, that lesson plans have to be submitted to the government, to the state government, before teachers can plan their work, to make sure they analyzing that there is no critical race theory being snuck in. So, I mean, we see here in terms of all that is going on, as well as within the church, where we've been meeting and meeting again about certain issues in terms that will affect us for the next 25 years on out. And so now, just tossing it out there, some of the things that we have seen, and also on a lighter note, the Lakers are on a losing slide. So now they're talking about that on First Take. What's LeBron going to do? Will Westbrook be traded? So we all have a sense of levity there.
I hope so.
Okay. All right. So anybody jump out there, anything that's really gnawing at you right now. And we're looking also online. If you have a question or have something to be addressed, feel free. I'm looking at it right now, and we'll bring that up as we go through the discussion. All right. Anybody tossing it out there? Anything that pique your interest?
All right, well, let's just look at the buildup, the Russian buildup on the Ukraine border, and understand that practically every other generation, there's some kind of military buildup, because that is an international economic catalyst. Nothing stimulates an economy like war. Yep. And particularly conventional warfare, the amassing of troops and conventional arms and armament. It's all to stimulate the economy. And I juxtapose that against what's happening to the economy in this country, with inflation now having been this morning on CNN told to be 7.1%.
Yeah.
Which is the highest since 1982. And it's cyclical and it's sick, but it seems the only way that we can marshal resources and stimulate an economy is through some kind of aggressive preparation. And so they got this posturing going on now. I mean, for the United States to be sending 3,000 troops, it got another 8,000 on standby, but you're going to send 3,000 troops to where the Russians are amassing over 100,000. That's taking a butter knife to a gunfight. So what's the real purpose? And then you get to the real purpose. The real purpose is an oil pipeline.
Okay. Dad, I thought you wanted to say something.
It's interesting I spent some time in Kiev. I preached there in Kiev at the United Methodist Church in Kiev years ago. It's in the Ukraine. It's a slow, very, very, what we would call very country-looking place. Very country-looking place, but the issue always comes around to how much are we going to have, as Philip said, the oil pipeline, which is Russia's primary financial boost, and it stops and goes to Germany. Now, if there is any thought of a war, we talk about war, but once you get in war, people go crazy. Then you can talk about an atomic kind of blast, hydrogen bombs, all kind of bombs coming forward, and that could begin to be the destruction of the total society in which we live. And when you hear people talking about and saying it just as another matter of fact, there could be over 50,000 people killed. My Lord, it has gotten to a place where we really have little regard for life. Kiev in Ukraine was interesting. People from Poland and other places would come from the Netherlands, would come, that they had drinking requirements. And when they drank all their requirements up in their country, they come over to Kiev and in the bus loads and drink and get full before the weekend was out and go back home. It was kind of country place, but it was an interesting time. That was in 1987. Interesting time. But we have advanced far beyond that now. We're talking about war. War is terrible. War ain't gonna stop with no just shooting on the battlefields. Somebody is gonna push the wrong button, and we're gonna be in the atomic age all over again. The nuclear age is gonna be booming. And when the nuclear age comes in, that wipes out everything. But it all settles down to one thing, the dollar. When I look at our country, when I look at our country, and I hear some of these folks talk about patriots and all this, how stupid are 35% of our folk who see stuff and still don't want to recognize it? What we almost, like I said, we almost deserve, if we get anything, we almost deserve it. How stupid are they? I guess it's mind, to me, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling.
So,
are you gonna believe your lying eyes or believe my telling voice?
Oh, Mike, can I jump in one thing?
Go right ahead, please. Go ahead.
This is not related to anything. This is an aside. Thanks for also everyone, not just for your watching, but we're also live, not just on Facebook now, but we're also streaming live simultaneously on YouTube. So we got people watching on YouTube and on Facebook. Just want to thank Brother Lavender and the technical team for making that happen. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Anybody wants to add in terms to we see that one thing we've learned, but I guess we didn't learn from the Vietnam War, in terms of those capitalist interests of trying to keep things going. I think in the movie The Deer Hunter, they taught us what they were really over there for, fighting the interests for Shell, for Budweiser, for those multinational corporations, so they won't lose any profits. Are we seeing something similar with this in terms of this posturing? There's no longer East-West. It seems like there's have or have-nots now. Anybody else want to jump in on that? I see Stephen Jr., like you posturing. You want to say something? Go ahead, my political scientist.
No, me and my wife, we talked about this a few days ago, where I had to ask the significance of why it was so important for us to stop Russia from invading into Ukraine. And I guess she said it was really about Russia's afraid of NATO, or Ukraine being a part of NATO, and how really that's really what the biggest threat is. And so when I look at, over country, over time, there's always some conflicts, there's always some skirmishes, no matter where we are. Here we are, we just fought the longest war in American history, which was like the war on terror, being in Iraq and Afghanistan. We just pulled our troops out of those two countries, or some of them, and here we are about to send more in. And here we are talking about when they come home, not being able to have the support, whether for mental, physical, emotional. So here we are, we just sending our men and women off to war, but they have no resources to come home. So is it worth it? And that's really my question. What are we fighting over? It reminds me of the spread of communism, where that's the reason I went to Vietnam, where we believe that if communism were to spread, it would eventually hit over to the US. That's when we had to go to Vietnam to fight that war, because we wanted to stop communism. That didn't get us anywhere. I think too many times we get involved in too many conflicts, too many skirmishes that really does not involve us. And I think that's how we end up getting in trouble.
So that goes back to the late President John F. Kennedy with his domino theory. As one
Yes.
so shall others. So now with this whole thing, persons are probably saying, how does that really affect us here on these shores in terms of why should we be concerned about this conflict and how will it affect us? I think Dad and Phil brought up a good point about in terms of an economic boost. So you see one of the biggest items in our country's budget deals with defense. Is this really defense or offense? Steve, like you ready to say something? Big Steve in Kansas City, like you ready to say something?
It's all about money. That's all it is. Everything's about money. You know, it's just ridiculous. Just money, 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 money. I don't care how you look at it, it's money.
Could it also be? Can war also be used as a distraction as well? Because not just money, but war will distract from other issues that people may not want you to look at. So they'll zero you in and try to galvanize you around this war, as opposed to really looking at some of the other issues like voter suppression and issues.
Very true.
Like
That's true, Joe.
Continued oppression, continued racial segregation and division, whatever your issue may be. Just my thoughts.
Well, it is a good Kickstarter for nationalism. You have those triggers. Thinking back to the Rittenhouse trial, where the judge had Lee Greenwood's song "God Bless the USA," and that is the rallying song they played at all of Trump's rallies. They played it. That's what you hear whenever you feel as if you need to rally the troops to really stoke the fires of nationalism. You hear those things. It seems like there is the threat of us losing something, which we're not really losing anything at all. However, there is always that threat. Anybody else wish to speak about? Well, here's a good segue. This nationalism has even affected us in terms of how we look at our history. Critical race theory. What we have now where persons want to pretty much whitewash what is being taught in our schools. I think, Phil, you served, you and Dad served in terms of the capacity of county government. Dad on the school board, you a county commissioner and a school board person. Stephen, you're involved. Stephen Jr., you're involved in the local politics of New Haven, as well as Joe, where he is, and Steve, Big Steve. So now is one thing I've learned, the importance of being involved in what is being taught in the schools. How does this nationalism play into this talk now about critical race theory?
I can lead it off. I don't think it's so much about nationalism. Or I had a conversation on Saturday night where we talked about Jewish and Black relationships, and there was a man in the audience with a differing view, came up to me after the conversation and said, simple yes or no. Should my kids be made feel guilty to learn about the racism in this country? White man, and he felt that critical race theory is going to put this guilt trip, on his children and blame them for the ills of this country. My response was simply, why would you feel guilty? Or telling the history of what occurred, like what will actually exude guilt or prompt guilt to hearing the history of this country. I think too many times where we try to really whitewash or really just try to alleviate all the real horrors that occur not just in the US but across the world, just to appease people without them understanding that they were able to have a direct benefit of those atrocities and of those horrific events. And so for me, I don't like when people try to say, well, you make me feel guilty. No, it's about you being able to acknowledge that you do have privilege based off a system that was ever designed to work for people like me, but was always designed to prop you up. And so no need to feel guilty about that, but that's what the system is. For you to say, you know what, I am aware of my privilege.
Hey,
And I
Steve,
really, yes,
is it being guilty or is it being convicted?
I think for them it's guilty because how they're looking at it from the other side is simply like, you want me to feel bad. Like you're trying to really break me down and feel guilty of something that I had nothing to do with.
But
Like
son,
I
son,
don't
let me
know
say
what
this.
it,
Let
go
me
ahead,
jump in
Dad.
and say this. And this is true in nature. A hurt dog hollers. If you don't believe it, take a rock and hit a dog and watch that dog holler. A hurt dog will holler. They don't want it out there because it's nastier than we could even imagine. Can you imagine the pedophiles and the homosexuals who had people they could use in the way they wanted to? Can you imagine that? It's nasty, it's dirty, it's low down. And yes, they don't want tender white ears to hear it. Go ahead, Phil.
The matter boils down to this. Critical race theory is being suppressed by white guilt for the purposes of preserving white privilege. Simple.
That's good.
That's exactly what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because of the oppressive element of society historically in the United States of America is made to feel guilty by the inconvenient truth of their past, rather than teach that for the purposes of preserving their own privilege, they choose to ignore it. Knowledge is to inform. What you do with it and how you feel about it is up to you. And if it makes you feel bad, then what you need to do is go somewhere and examine your feelings. But you cannot blame the truth on making you feel some kind of way, because the truth is simply the truth. I applaud all of the efforts to address racial history in this country. And the name critical race theory is a catchy moniker, but it's not theory.
Mm-hmm.
What is being taught, what is being proposed is teaching critical race fact or critical race reality. It is as simple as that. And when you choose to ignore reality, that means that there is something wrong with you. And you need to examine the reasons why you believe that little tender white ears will be injured by hearing the truth.
Well, let me just say two points. First point is that Connecticut, for the state, has just, I think the first in the country to approve a Black and Latino curriculum for children in high school. And so they did approve that last year in last legislative session. My concern was who's teaching the history, because there's been a lack of minorities, Black and brown, inside our public school systems. So my biggest concern is you're going to have other groups teaching history that may not feel so connected to how we're feeling about it. And so I think that's one of the biggest questions: who's going to be teaching our history? And secondly, as when we talk about critical race theory, we talk about whitewashing. I don't want to just, talk about for race relations, but we do whitewash in our own church, especially for things and issues that come about. We whitewash it. We try to explain it in a particular way that is more appeasing and more appealing. Things didn't happen. Statements were overvalued. It's not what you thought it was. Things were miscalculated. I'm just saying.
I know. Now you tripped. We come back.
No. All what I'm saying
He
is
went there.
we do it on all levels.
I knew he would.
So it's not just black and white. It's not just whitewashing. but we whitewash in the Black church as well. When things are not as appeasing, but we don't want to deal with the truth, we whitewash it as well. So let's not just say that it's just germane to one particular subject. We do it all over.
Well, you know what we're going to do?
Oh, Lord.
We're going to do like around the
what?
horn.
You know what,
on
Mike?
ESPN. I wish I had a mute button for that right there. Daddy, go right ahead. Daddy, come on, Daddy, say something. Come on, Papa.
It only took about 15 minutes, but he was going to
Yeah, there you go, Steve. There we go. Go ahead, Daddy. Please bring us back into reality. Go ahead.
No, you what you have, you have a difference in generational culture application to life. You have Stephen, and you have two other layers of difficulty in reality of life ahead of us. It is a certainty that people who are afraid of losing power will do whatever they can to maintain the power. The bad part that gets me is when we have some folk who look like us who want to be in the power realm so bad until they forget who they are, where they come from, and how abused their whole condition has been. You know, I can remember when Clarence Thomas was being vetted for Supreme Court. I happened to be Bishop of New York then. And I tell you, the worst thing that could have happened to this nation for Black folk was when Clarence Thomas became a judge on the Supreme Court. But do you know there were a number of Black folk right there in Philadelphia? Because the meetings that discussed him and the senator who was pushing him had the meetings at 3801. And Black folk were pushing him. I wonder how many of them now are happy to see how this man has disrupted and torn up all the hopes that we had where we came so far. And one man now, he is the senior member on the Supreme Court. And Lord have mercy on our souls. We are in danger. And the bad part is when Black folk want so bad to be a part of the privileged class until they forget, just like we said last week, Black does not melt in the pot of culture.
No.
Black does not melt in the pot of culture. You go in Black, you come out Black. And ain't no way you're not going to change. It just one thing Whoopi Goldberg made, and people took it lightly, and it is true. If Jews can merge right in and become white, I grew up in Florida. Some of the Cubans that came over from Havana were as white, and they were whiter than the white folk and more racist than the white folk. They wanted to blend in. And the danger comes in when those who've been abused want to become so badly a part of the power structure until they do anything at all to get a part of being a privileged member of the class where you don't have to worry about everything. And now the struggle in our nation, and we see it clearly, the struggle is how long will the white male fight to maintain the control and the privilege that he has?
Amen.
How far will he go? How much damage can be done? And what can we do to change it? Because the struggle is now how the privileged white male can maintain the power that the privileged white male has put into practice in every part of our social order. And they even try to bring some Black folk in, and the Black folk, like what was that book, The Spook Who Sat by the Door?
Yes.
We become the spook who sat by the door, and we so happy we can sit there right by the door. It's going to be a struggle.
I have a question for you, Dad.
Huh?
I have a question for you. Mike and I stumbled on this movie. I can't remember the name of the movie. It was from the 30s, I want to say, and the movie was about
from the
black
40s,
man,
late 40s. Yeah.
was it late 40s? A black man and a black woman who were he was a doctor.
A Question of Race, I think that's what it was, something like that. Yeah.
And it was I'll find it when Dad answers. I'll look it up, Mike. But the whole movie, Dad, was he was passing. You know, he was passing for white, and the woman he was with passing for white. Their kids didn't even know they were black. It came out they were black. It was a big scandal. It was a big this and a big that. So with this assimilation thing you're talking about, people, I guess, don't try to do it so much anymore. But can you give us a little insight with your wisdom on how some black folk really used to, and maybe even still try to, but really
They still do.
Used to really pass?
I would not want to say it. I have a first cousin who who passed and is still passing down in New Orleans.
And for those
And what
who
did he
don't know,
tell you?
Dad,
What did he tell you, Daddy?
yeah, what is passing for those who don't know?
What
Dad?
did he tell you, Daddy? What did he tell you?
He's passing. He ain't black. He's white.
He told you don't come by no more. He's passing, right?
Right. You know. So that we see in our family because he could pass, and he saw the privilege of being a part of being able to pass. And now it's difficult because what's going to happen when the mixed marriages come and the children come and some can pass and some can't? What are we going to do?
So now with this whole thing in terms of culture, there's an adage that I've learned that I've shared with others, was told to me that you will never get ahead as long as you allow your oppressor to teach your future. So I mean, we've allowed ourselves, we've abdicated our roles in terms of educating our children, our future, upon history. That it's not just Black history, it's history, it's American history. We are a part of it. I read an interesting article that the architect who designed Duke's Chapel, the cathedral, designed it, helped build it, but was never allowed to enter it. And it wasn't until his great niece, I believe, his granddaughter, told folk when they were protesting in front of it, how would the architect feel? And she came out, and they never knew this. That my great uncle would not mind that, but that he never stepped foot in it, and it is a symbol in terms of how we think we are accepted, but we're not accepted. We're just tolerated. And I think that tells us a lot of achievements that we have within our own history. Again, getting back to the whitewashing of it, of not really teaching the contributions that we have made to this country. So as we segue now, I don't want my nephew to zone out, but he likes to talk, and it is true that we have whitewashed some things within our own church. One thing that really stood out for me as a child, I saw a picture of it, for the stained glass window of B.N. Duke in the Hayti Center, and where it was St. Joseph, old St. Joseph in Durham, and how it was prominently placed. And as a child, you would think that was God, the way it was placed there. And the sad thing about it, when you have people to think in terms of those images of the stained glass windows, that's how things were, there's a mental perniciousness there that really makes us see as if we are less than. There's a documentary on HBO about the absence of light, about the struggle of Black artists and craftspersons to have their pieces included in museums or galleries because there's a lack of diversity. So it's very pervasive in terms of this critical race fact. Jump in terms of this, in terms of this point of how after so many years, so many centuries, we're still talking about that here within our own country.
Michael, where you are, Michael, it's even you know, the some of the history is so in your face and yet somehow unknown.
Mhm.
You know, you talk about the picture of the image of B and Duke in the sanctuary of the old St. Joseph AME Church. Well, go back in the history and look at our school established there shortly after the end of the Civil War at Kittrell College in Kittrell, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Where did the buildings come from for Kittrell College?
Trinity
Right.
College. Yeah.
They came from Trinity College,
Yeah.
which was later renamed Duke University, and it was B.N. Duke who donated the buildings and had the buildings disassembled, transported, and reassembled to become the campus of Kittrell College. I mean, the ties, just, you know, I mean, just give the history and then live with the facts, because the facts are, you know, are the facts, you know, and I like to think that particularly in Durham, you had an enlightened group of Black folk for the last 180 odd years. When I think that one of the biggest jokes played on the majority culture in Durham is that one of the highest points in the city at one time was the steeple of the old St. Joseph AME Church. Now, St. Joseph AME Church had an interesting steeple in that it was not and is not now a cross that was on the top of that steeple. On the top of that steeple is a heart with an arrow piercing through it. And that is the symbol of the Haitian voodoo goddess, Ezra-Lee, goddess of love and prosperity. I wrote about this at great length, and some of you may later read it in my book, Stuck, Adventures in Parish Ministry. Because it is fascinating to me and a little ironic, because that whole section of Durham where Old St. Joseph is still called today Hayti, spelled Hayti. That's the way the 16th century cartographers spelled the name of the island nation Haiti, which is now Haity. And so I wonder, did Black folk really have that kind of a sophisticated sense of humor to put at the top of the steeple of the most prominent Black edifice in Durham, North Carolina, in a section called Hayti, the symbol of the voodoo Haitian goddess of love and prosperity, Ezra-Lee. And for those who might be listening, you can Google that. It's spelled capital Ezrulee. And I find that fascinating because I think about all the problems that our father, your grandfather, Steve, had in St. Joseph. And some of it had to be because he was preaching a Christian gospel under the symbol of a Haitian voodoo goddess.
Well, you know, one of the things, just to bring Dad in, I think one of the biggest things, one of the earth-shattering things, was to have a picture of a Black Jesus hung up in the church. Tell about that, Dad. You know, that was earth-shattering. Dad didn't spend Sunday after Sunday talking about the image during liberation theology.
Was that in the Pearson room, Mike? Where was that picture?
That was in room 6.
Room 6.
Yeah.
Room 6.
That
was the sacred room for the upper class Black folk who had some relationship with the white privileged class. And room 6, you could not go in room 6. They did not want so-called project folk in the room 6. They didn't want the street folk in room 6. And I heard Stephen Jr. talk about Ann Atwater, and they didn't want Ann Atwater in there, Stephen, in that room in Durham. That we have a difficult. The problem really boils down to the fact there was so much not marriage, but cross relationships with children who were not of the privileged class, but who were kept by the privileged class. In Durham, the library, how it was named, schools, how they were named, places where they were named, all based upon the family that they came from. Duke had a very, very strong relationship with the Black community. And his daughter had a very strong relationship with Vernon Jordan. And I'll just go ahead.
All right, so so it tells us in terms of how we have intermeshed, where the histories sort of, let's just say, intersect. So now with this whole thing, where do we go from here? In most of and we have 15 to 17 minutes left. So where do we go from here in terms of, since we are celebrating Black History Month, but that's just a time to say, let's not use this month to just make these achievements known, but how do we do this every day, each and every day, 364 days, 365 days a year, to make Black history a part of real history. It is embraced, and it is not just embraced, but is recognized for those things. So let's just go around the horn. I'm gonna start with Stephen and go with Joe and go ahead, Stephen.
You sure you want me to speak? You sure?
Yeah, I'm going. When you go over, I'm just going to say time. Okay, thank you, caller. Go ahead. I'm say thank you, caller. Go ahead.
I think that for us, we always try to find validation through other groups, where we want to get recognized for our achievements and our accomplishments, and the only way we can feel validated if another ethnic group were to say, we acknowledge you. And I think from that mindset, we're always going to lose. I really believe that our education, and really what really grew the Black church, was how we educated our children, and how the Black church really was the one-stop shop for economic empowerment, for civil rights, just for your history. And I really believe in today's context, the church has lost that arm.
Right.
Where we're no longer focusing on education. We're not focusing on economic empowerment, not focused on social justice. And so really here we are, we're actually relegating or letting go our responsibility to other cultures, other ethnic groups. Let the public schools teach it. Let the US government say something about it. And we really have lost that responsibility. And so in terms of, looking forward, especially how we're acknowledging and recognizing, the founder of African Methodism and Richard Allen, the reason why he left St. George's was so that African American issues can be uplifted, they can be promoted, that they can go a place where they're able to grow and really be about them. You don't see that in today's context. I really believe that the church is so far from the vision and the aspirations of what Richard Allen intended that I don't know, are we able to revert or change course? If we look at our colleges or who they're serving, if we look at our institutions as a whole, what are we doing as a church? You're on a connectional or universal level for the original purpose, which was to promote African American issues. So I'll leave it at that. I'm done now.
Okay, Joe.
Interesting.
Yes.
Anything add to that? Anything was to add to that?
What was the question again?
In terms of where you see in terms of our critical race analysis here, in terms of where do you see us on down the road?
I mean, I agree with Steve, although I'm laughing because I don't know where all this militantism all of a sudden came from in my nephew. I'm proud of him, but he's come a long way with his with his militant points of view. But I mean, it's the thing. Just my whole thing is just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. Like, for instance, we talked earlier about some of the misconceptions out there regarding the health administration, the Biden health administration, what they're doing with drugs. And there was a rumor going around that they're giving out crack pipes, but they're not. But it was a rumor that was set forth by obviously people who didn't want, to cast a good light on this administration. So they put out lies. And unless you research those lies, then you're going to believe those lies. And the problem I think many people have, and this goes across color lines, they don't research. They don't look. The old saying is, if you want to hide something, that sometimes the best hiding place is right in a book, because nobody's reading. So we don't research, we don't read. And with the critical race theory, we don't, the truth is not told. You have to tell the truth, and you have to be honest, because there has to be an explanation as to why some things are the way they are. It's not just a bunch of black folk getting together and complaining about nothing. There is a systemic, underlying conditional problem that has stemmed since the beginning of time, that if we don't look at it, then not only will we never be able to move past it, but we'll never be able to understand how we got where we are. So essentially, I agree with Steve, what he's saying, completely. And it boils down to just the desire to some people just to whitewash.
This dovetails into a whole host of subjects, from gentrification to where we see in terms of foreign policy, domestic policy. It's just a whole lot that goes on with this. Big Steve, you want to say something?
Yeah, if you fail to tell your story, somebody else will.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line. And others have told our story. They've done what they wanted to do with it. As a matter of fact, there was a textbook, I believe it was somewhere in Texas, where they talked about American slavery, and they came over as workers.
Yeah.
They came over as workers.
Yeah.
I mean, now and they took that person to task over that, because that's not how it was. If you don't tell your story, somebody else will. I've heard it many times that African chiefs sold, they sold their others into slavery. Yeah, but what they did was they sold them into a form of slavery that's not chattel slavery. That's what they were thinking. They didn't think they were selling them into chattel slavery, where you owned a person for life. Sure, there's slavery in the Bible, but after 7 years. Oh, don't get me started.
I think that we have to say, we have to change the language as well in terms of saying slaves, but enslaved persons.
Right.
We were enslaved.
Right.
We did not, this was not something that we wanted. It was forced upon us.
Call it what it is, Mike. Even though it wasn't true, the way they viewed it as property. They treated pets, dogs, and horses, and pigs, who you would eat later on, were treated better than slaves who were treated as property.
But biblical slavery was not like that at all.
And you don't have to look to slavery to see that being happening today, especially, dogs get treated better than African Americans, even in today's context. So this is something that, is historical, but it's actually applicable in today's world as well.
Now, even with that, there is still an enslavement going on psychologically, as well as economically, that we do not wish to, we just want the American dream, but it becomes the African American's nightmare. We do not understand in terms of credit. We don't understand the financing of handling our own finances, of supporting our own. I thank Daddy and Mama for that, of teaching us in terms of credit, in terms of financing, making sure that you have enough that the greatest thing is not having the biggest or the most expensive car. And it's taken me years to learn this. It is when you're able to take care and go places. You don't have to worry about how you're going to pay for this because you've planned for it. Howling Wolf, when he used the line in Cadillac Records, it's a prominent line where they ask, you know, when the guy asked him, you know, come on, I'll get you a Cadillac. He said, no, truck. He said, his truck is fine. He said, I don't believe in being in debt to the company store. I own the truck. Truck don't own me. And I think a lot of us need to get into that in terms of that economic enslavement that we find ourselves renting more so than trying to invest in a mortgage. Big Phil, let me hear you.
What I mean is it really comes down to intentionality.
Yeah.
And being intentional and learning from other groups. I won't say races, other groups. See, son, when you look at the Asian community, the Hispanic community, and then look at the African American community, we are the only community that has failed to understand integration does not necessarily mean assimilation.
Yeah.
I mean, they integrate into society, but they maintain their community and ethnic values and origins. We look on integration as only being something in which we are successful when we are fully assimilated into a society into which we will never fully assimilate. That ain't gonna never let Black folk assimilate fully into this society. And so we need to instead refocus what our understanding of integration is. And what integration is bringing disparate things that are not alike together. But each maintains its integrity. We surrender our integrity by our desire to assimilate. One of the biggest mistakes we've made in this country that shows we're devolving. We've not only allowed our oppressors to educate our children, look at what else we have stood idly by and allowed to happen. We have all decisions concerning education made by non-educators. Politicians, state legislators,
right.
make all the decisions concerning education. All of your decisions about education are made by non-educators, and now the de-evolution continues. Because the legislature is saying now, well, let the parents decide.
Right.
Let the parents decide what the educational standards are going to be. And the parents are not educators. Mm-hmm. And it's like watching a clogged toilet. And the drain goes down very slowly, but it still goes down. And we are going down because we fail to understand that. And before you cue the music on me, Dr. Michael Cousin, I want to say to all of us as we look at history, be very careful, because history means casting a critical eye. And there are some historians who will argue that Richard Allen founded the AME Church for other Black folk and not for himself. The argument being that as Martin Luther, the head of the Protestant Reformation, lived and died a Roman Catholic priest, Richard Allen was bishop of the AME Church, but he lived and died an itinerant elder in the Methodist Episcopal Church. Now, without going into detail, there are books, and you can read them and disagree with the conclusions, but that's part of the healthy dialogue that we do not have anywhere concerning history in this country.
So another good book that just comes to mind, Harry V. Richardson, Dark Salvation. If you can find it, please add that to your library. Daddy, let me hear you, Papa.
I appreciate the comparison that Philip made so very well. That to me has been our problem historically. We have mistaken integration and think it becomes a simulation, only because for years we were always led to believe that the best thing had to be something that was operated by white folk who had more knowledge, more understanding, more everything than we had. And that was kept alive in our communities. When I went to high school, the high school I went to, the name will tell you what it was like, Industrial High School.
Yeah.
That was the name, Industrial High School. The high school for white folk in West Palm Beach was 3 blocks from where I lived. We could not go there. We got books after they got torn up and after they were abused by Palm Beach High. They sent it to Industrial High because we are Industrial High. There was one high school for almost a whole county. We had I can only remember one grade school, and they had double sessions was a thing always accepted. You either went from 8 to 12 or from 1 to 5. That was for everybody up to grades 1 through 6. Now, we thought that if we became integrated, we become assimilated and begin to enjoy some of the privileges that they had. But again, assimilation is not what we received. We received a tokenism, which says you can come in and spend your money at the drugstore counter. You can come in through the front door of the movie house. You can even now go to some of the hotels that you thought you couldn't go to. And that's what we thought would lead to assimilation. But it was just a token integration where you will notice historically, and as I look over this calendar of folk who sit before me, you will see that at every step of the journey, the privileged white man will relinquish one little bit for you. And the last bit they relinquished to us, and unfortunately, they said, now, what just like Mitch McConnell said, you got a black president, you had a black president, what else do you want? They give up piece by piece by piece. They refuse to accept the fact that in order to have a just society, there must be more than just the token integration.
Mm-hmm.
There must be the leveling of the playing field, and then let's see if assimilation can come in. It's been devastating. I look back and I am reminded of things that happened in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s. Ain't much changed. We right back.
So with that whole being said, another thought that we just, in terms of race relations, recently, I think of the 9 coaching vacancies in the NFL, only one was really seriously, that they're seriously talked to and got African-American Lovie Smith to go to the Texans, which is not really a desired place in terms of the talent and the management there. But I think that we see a league that is over 70% African-American, but only now 2 coaches out of all the clubs that are head coaches. You have some to use the argument that says not necessarily being the head coach, but the general manager, that you have more black general managers than you do head coaches. But one thing we're looking at now in terms of not just being the head coach or general manager, coming together and having some Black ownership.
Mike, what about the Dolphins' new coach? He does. They say he's
biracial.
Yeah.
They're saying he's biracial. Well, they're not saying he's biracial, but he has some biracial folk in his family. In other words, the late, not the late, but Cedric the Entertainer, the comedian, said he's got some Negro tendencies, So, he's got some, the hair, like Abraham Lincoln's hair, and some features that make you think that there's some marginalization going on down the wood pile. So now, how does this affect us in the original?
Now, Mike, before you go, it would be interesting. Lovett Smith was at AME when he was at up in Madison, Wisconsin. He was at AME. Look and see who he married. He got a snow bunny.
Yeah, well, yeah. So oh, have mercy. I'm glad we come to the close, but that would have made viewership go up. So now I think that whole thing, it just shows that from the shores of what's happening in Ukraine, what we see here, in terms of how we are to have a collective voice and to show that if you want us to make a sacrifice, allow us to be part of the process. We demand that because we have paid the price. So with that whole thing being said, with this free flowing Thursday, I see the clock on the wall. It's now 1:03. And now we give a chance to do some closing comments. And then we have Daddy to do that. And he closes us out with his comments and with his prayer. Again, I wish to thank those who viewed today, and I wish to apologize. I made her a preacher, but Sister Lomax, thank you so much. She's not Reverend Lomax, Sister Lomax down in Selma. Thank you so much, the 9th District.
Yes.
And for those who, Terrence Mays, thank you, my brother, for watching, as well as the questions that were brought forth in this discussion. Please share this and tell others what we do each and every Thursday with this panel and the discussions that we have here. If you thought I did a decent job moderating, send some thumbs ups and I appreciate it. Maybe they let me do it again. We'll start from the militant. The militant with his put your hood up, Steve, because you gotta let folks see you're a militant guy. We're gonna start with who is the character on the Boondocks, the real militant one?
Huey.
We're gonna start with Stephen Huey cousin. Come on, give us your comments and we'll move on up. Go ahead.
If there is a story, the reason I became militant is because now I'm starting to recognize my value. And there's a story that resonates with me where a father gave his daughter a car, very old car, upon graduation. And he said, before you take this car, go to the used car dealership and see what it's worth. She came back and said that the car is worth only $1,000 because it's a very old car. And then the father said, okay, take the car to the pawn shop. She came back and said that the pawn shop only offered her $100 because it looks pretty worn out. And so he said, okay, take it to the car show. So she took it to the car show and she came back in amazement where she said that this car is worth $100,000 because it's an old Nissan Skyline R34 and many collectors are trying to find this car. And the father said, I want you to learn that lesson, that depending on where you go, there is a value already assessed to it. And so understand your value and where you at. If you don't get your value, go somewhere else where they know what you're worth. So that's what I'm gonna leave you with today. All right.
All
So
right. And that's a good segue for our brother who's watching, David Cousin, who's selling a car. If you want to find out how much it costs, contact Stephen. It's a good car, S500, blue with beige interior. So go. It's a good car. Talk to Stephen.
it's on the Facebook Marketplace. It's on OfferUp. All right. The Kelly Blue Book value goes from 1,000 to 5,000. So we're looking to get within that range, but we want to take on all offers. Hit me up on the Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp, and we can get it done.
We've done that for you, Dave. Okay, Joe.
Yes.
You've been out of it today. Come on, Joe.
No. I'm just laughing at Stephen Jr. But no. Thanks everybody as always for watching and for being a part of this discussion today. We're truly excited that you have been and glad to have you. Want to thank, as always, Brother Lavender, Reverend Pace, Sister Frey. Want to thank my brother Mike for moderating, my nephew Steve, my brothers Steve and Phil, my dad Bishop, and just thank them. And just continue to press forward and continue to try to always do better, and always try to do the best and be the best that we can in spite of all the obstacles and in spite of the other things we face. And just that's why we call this Forward Focus Thursday. I named it Forward Focus Thursday because the whole point is to try to move us forward and not backwards. So I thank you all for helping to do that and truly appreciate you.
Steve?
Yes. Every now and then I read the Willie Lynch letter, The Making of a Slave.
Yeah.
And it's very short. You read that and you can see, exactly what's happening today. Nothing has changed. We do have that slave or enslaved mentality still today. You got light-skinned folk, dark-skinned folk, brown-skinned folk, folk with good hair, folk with kinky hair. I don't know what good hair is anymore. I don't have hair. I got a good scalp. Amen. But anyway, I do that from time to time just to remind myself of how things are and why they're like this. I'm done.
To that whole thing with good hair, bad hair on the playground, having older brothers, persons would sometimes look at us and say, why does your brother have good hair? You got bad hair. And I remember mom and daddy telling us to free ourselves from that thinking. The only good hair is hair that stays on the head. Bad hair is hair that falls. So,
right.
There's no such thing. Texture. Don't allow things like that, the external, to keep you thinking less than yourself. So, brothers and sisters, be proud of who you are. Be proud. I'm going to close out on my remarks and then Phil and then Daddy. In the words of William Devon, you may not drive a great big Cadillac, gangster white walls, TV antennas in the back. You may not have a car at all, but remember, my brothers and sisters, you can still stand tall. Just be thankful for what you got.
That's right.
You may not drive a great big Cadillac, diamond in the back,
some
rooftop, digging in the scene with the gangster lean, gangster white walls. Be thankful for what you got.
That's right.
Phil?
I want to thank Alan Temple and Brother Lavender, Reverend Pace, and Dr. Joseph Nathaniel Cousin Sr. for what I would call today not a free-flowing Thursday, but a directed stream of consciousness. And I think it's been a very good discussion. And I would hope that we are able somehow to hold on to hope in all of this, that things can get better and that a better day is on our horizon. So what I would leave people thinking today, because so much of what we have said carries with it just a hint of negativity. I would remind folk of something that the Apostle Paul wrote to the church at Corinth. Our eyes have not seen, our ears have not heard. It has not even entered into our hearts what God has in store. And all God asks is that we love him.
Amen. And so now as we prepare to hear from our Father, next week, maybe, Stephen, we'll touch a little bit more in the area that you want to touch in. to keep you keep your juices flowing. Get ready. Maybe we'll touch into some stuff that you want to discuss. But not this week. Go ahead, Daddy, close us out. Thank you so much.
I've listened to you. I had an opportunity to hear a very good Bible study last night, and it was on faith. And one of the things that struck me, you've got to have faith to believe that things are possible. If you don't think they're possible, then they'll never happen. Mm-hmm. And I think that what we have here is a restoration of the faith that we have in who we are. We've been through mountains. I've been up hills and down through the valleys. I've had some good days, had some bad days, had some hills to climb. But when I think things over, all of my good days far outweigh my bad days. And I'm going to have my faith to think things can be changed. And I'm not going to spend my time complaining about everything. My job is to believe, to trust, and to hope, and to know that I've got more than just a mustard grain of faith. I got a whole pocket full of faith that's been with me for 89 years. And so I'm dependent upon those who are a part of the trail that comes from the parsonage onto the church, onto the community. The trail that will say, we are not going to give up. We believe, we have the faith. God promised, God said so, and I do believe. And if they ask how we can do it, I believe we can bring change, we can bring hope, we can bring a just society if we have the faith, the grain of mustard seed. So you think about that. Had a good Bible study last night. I enjoyed it. Every now and then, it came from Allen Temple. Every now and then,
Joe,
Allen Temple would start.
Dr. Joe,
you got to hear a good exegesis, and it helped this old man to remember. Don't give up the ship. Don't give up the ship. Even though it might have holes in it, look like it's sinking, God's got some plaster of love and grace that can fill up all the holes. And the old ship of Zion ain't gonna sink.
That's right.
There's some who try to plunge us down and make us sink. But grace and mercy and love, I got faith enough to know that I can patch up the holes with God's glory and God's goodness. So now bless us this day, Lord. Give us strength. Give us your comfort. And keep us ever aware that ours is a task to believe, to move forward, and to try to make your kingdom become a reality for all to see, enjoy, and participate in. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Thanks, everybody.